Let's check the cameras and record the live stream. We're just watching. And we're going to record, get things sorted out. It looks pretty good, so we're just going to fine-tune things, fine-tune them a little. We've already started today's live stream. Everything's fine. Everything's all right. In 3 minutes, we'll start today's live stream. The theme will be copy, right? Copying is in fashion. Let's install it. We're going to use the copy theme. I'm going to show you a little bit about the concepts I have. These concepts I have are concepts about, do you see a reflection in my eyes? Let's see if, my understanding of certain aspects of biomes is based on several factors. This is a different idea I have about biomes. Today I'm going to share this idea of biomes with you. I think it's better, less glare. We'll start today's live stream in just a minute. In a minute, I'm going to explain the concept of biomes to you and how you'll better understand things, some new ideas. New ideas are always good, right? It's always good to have some new ideas. Everything is centralized. And let's start now. It's 8 p.m. and we're on an adventure. Look, today is November 12th, 2025. Today's live stream. Name COP30. It had to be, right? COP30, but COP30. Freedom of movement in a free Latin America. It's important that we emphasize this. Freedom of movement, everyone. Freedom, freedom, freedom of movement in a free Latin America. Look, before 1500 on the American continent, the populations that were on the continent migrated from one side to the other. Remember I told you about the Umbu culture 10,000 years ago? I came here to the south of the country, Argentina, Rio Grande do Sul, Santa Catarina, Parana, Uruguay, 10,000 years ago, but they migrated through various places without borders. Freedom to come and go is without borders, but there's more. And I'll talk about it in a moment. It's not just without borders. Freedom to come and go is a resource for going, a resource for staying, a resource for returning. Yes, coming, staying, and going. Or as that guy about freedom says, who talks a lot, let it come, let it stay, and let it go. Freedom to come and go, freedom. This is important. In America, COP30, why is Jackson talking about freedom at COP30? Because COP30 is about the environment. And we did something that was very devastating. Colonization. Europe came and colonized the American continent. And with the colonization of the American continent, the freedom to come and go ended. It ended. Do you understand? So you've already concluded this. And with the colonization of the American continent, something very, 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 very important happened, which I'm going to emphasize to you now. That's a concept of a biome. A biome, for example, the Atlantic forest. Some say the Atlantic forest. The Atlantic forest is a biome. A biome is a living thing, very large, but it's not very large with just one DNA. It's very large with many DNAs. For example, you, the person listening, have 1,000,000,000,000 DNAs replicated in your body. A little more, a little less, but 1,000,000,000,000 DNAs applied in your body. The Atlantic forest biome has 1,000,000,000,000 different DNAs, including our humans within the Atlantic forest biome. What does this have to do with colonization? Let's go back. To colonize means the following. You have a biome, for example, the Atlantic forest biome, for example, for the place where Santa Catarina, Parana, or the Atlantic forest biome, which is almost the entire Brazilian coast. It's not the entire coast because it doesn't include Rio Grande do Sul, but this Atlantic forest biome that goes into the interior of Parana, an Atlantic forest biome. To colonize is the following. The difference between being on the planet and being from the planet. Jackson, what's the difference? In English, it's to be, ser, and estar. What's the difference between somos do planeta and estamos no planeta? The difference is colonization. I didn't understand. I didn't understand. Are we of the planet or are we on the planet? What's the difference? So if you go back before 1500 to our prehistory, 10,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, before the arrival of the Europeans, before colonization, we, the DNA of the American continent, are the planet. We are America. We, along with the trees, with the living things, are. Colonization speaks like this. We are. So colonization will preach that there is a deity outside the planet, and this deity outside the planet, number one, has rules about what she says and what she thinks. And the rules, in the case of European colonization, used biblical religiosity, so it's God, Jesus, the Bible at that level, and imposed the rules of what Christianity is, and imposed a rule that we are on this planet, but we don't belong to this planet. Very different from a decolonial idea. We are the planet. You came from the planet. Look, and to get this idea out of your head, which sometimes some people say, Jackson, but I've always been formed with this idea. How am I going to get out of this colonial idea that we are on the planet? That's how it is. Let's suppose you have the possibility to analyze any planet in the entire universe, any planet. So you go and take a sample from that planet, a sample, a small sample with a point. You go to planet X in the universe, you know where. You go there and take a sample, a very small sample, a sample from the planet, from somewhere on the planet. You take the sample and come back. This sample from the planet will have atoms. You took a sample the size of a ping pong ball, a small ball, a tiny one like that, a sample of that size. You took a sample. Okay, so you took a sample from that planet, or you took several sample points, and look, the atoms of that planet are these, the structures of that planet are these. So what is composed only of these structures is the planet, okay? But let's suppose the opposite. Someone on a very distant planet came to Earth, launched a probe, and by chance that probe entered you and took a piece of you, a very small piece, like a fingernail. Okay, so measure this fingernail. Look at all the elements, all the atoms and such, and see that this fingernail is planet Earth. That's it. You are the planet. We are the planet. We are not on the planet. We came from the planet. So colonization says that we are on the planet. So it becomes colonization, which is usually done by 0-1. 0-1 are the richest, okay? 0-1, they take advantage of the population. They use the population, talking about rules and norms from outside the planet, but they have to be followed so they can get richer and richer. Okay, why did I say all this? And the COP, what does the COP have to do with this? The COP is trying to preserve biomes. It's not just forest, it's biomes. The Amazon biome, most of which is Brazilian, the Atlantic forest biome as well. There are some very serious problems at COP. First, I'm not involved with COPy. I don't know everything that happens there. I only know some news that people tell me about COP. Regardless of how COP is now, which I think is wonderful, but regardless of how it was structured, we would find a million flaws. Completely different from what it is now, with a million flaws as well. The copy is what we need at this moment, not the exactness, the perfection of an event. This is a moment, a COP moment, a moment of change, a moment to shift the planet from consumption to something more conscious. That's COP. So, in this sense, I want to talk to you about COP30. And in this sense, I think we are close to a fantastic paradigm. And I would involve two people in this paradigm, Lula and Claudia Scheinbaum. Claudia Scheinbaum is the president of Mexico. This girl is, in my opinion, a little genius. Lula has enormous political sensitivity and charisma, drawing millions of people around him, and this Claudia Scheinbaum from Mexico is another luminary, but Scheinbaum is very different. Lula is a Christian. No matter how much you like or dislike Lula, Lula is colonial. He is Christian. He is in favor of increased consumption. He is God, the Bible, Jesus. That's what he is in his basic structure. So within that structure, you are on the planet. Claudia is not. Claudia is secular. Secularism is something that it's a mentality, and she is scientific. She is a researcher, and she is the president of Mexico. A secular person will look at each religion and value it, regardless of whether it is against this or that, as long as it is within the norms that help people, human beings. So when you combine Lula's charisma with the secularism and scientific knowledge of Claudia Scheinbaum and COP30, we have a very significant moment. We have a very significant moment on the planet, especially in this global south. A very significant moment. Always, always the North, the Northern Hemisphere said that they were the spirits of goodness and so on, and that the South didn't even have a spirit. That's why in the beginning, when they came to colonize Brazil and the Americas, killing indigenous people wasn't a problem at all because they didn't have a soul nor a spirit. They were like animals. Why were they like animals? Because the planet Zeron said, look, we need these lands, we need that gold, we need the Brazil wood, we need to send slaves there, we need money. So if someone is getting in the way, look, who doesn't have a soul? And then they become an enemy. And if they become an enemy, did you notice they make them an enemy and then consume them? What does this have to do with copying, with freedom of movement? When we were colonized, they started to have lines, the line of the Treaty of Tordesillas, lines that say, this is Brazil, lines that say, this is the state, this is the municipality. And then you don't have freedom of movement. And what does this have to do with the biome? The biome is a whole entity. It keeps growing, it keeps growing, it keeps growing. What have we done to the Atlantic forest? The Atlantic forest biome, for example, we've chopped it up. So there are small, isolated patches. There's not even riparian forest anymore. To connect this entire biome, this living structure that is the Atlantic forest biome, that is the Amazon biome, you can't cut off a biome, you can't cut a piece and not let anything flow. At least 100, 200 meters, you have to have the biome passing from one side to the other so that the molecules, so that, all the structures of animals, of small things and microorganisms pass from one side to the other for the biome to continue living, because then the biome will perceive the external influences, all of them, in many different ways. What am I saying? I'm saying that some information that arrives in the biome, which different DNAs are perceiving as the same information, belongs to it. So we belong to the biome. When we, along with the biome, perceive the same fact, it's getting colder, it's getting warmer, it's getting dry, it's raining, it's very arid, it's very cold, it's very hot. We perceive it together, and then we have synchronicity, we have belonging to the biome, and synchronicity is a very important theme for us. Normally, in my ideas, we have 3 zones in the body, which are 3 stages. Of course, there will be different zones, different ways. These are concepts that I present to facilitate the understanding of how the brain works. We have 3 zones. When you force yourself to do things, when you already know how to do things very well, you are free to do them because you want to and you do them naturally. But when someone forces you to do something, and sometimes parents force their children to do something, and the children sometimes don't want to do it. But in the beginning, it was important for the child's own survival. So I force them, they learn, and they might fall into zone 2 and continue doing it without having to make the effort anymore. Or the child themselves will keep making an effort and will do it in zone 1 and end up in zone 2. So zone 2 is a cerebral synchronicity of doing things. You understand? Of being, doing, and thinking synchronicity. When you break the synchronicity, there's a moment in your biome, in your body, and you want to adjust. Learn a new word. The new word has certain concepts. Some people, like Jackson, when you learn the value, you don't just memorize it. Here, I read it and I learned it this week. No, when you learn a new word, the brain waves in your brain change. They are out of sync, they become out of sync, and your brain starts to reprogram itself based on the meaning of a new word. It destabilizes itself to seek a new stability, a new way of being. A new word, a new word. The concept of a new word changes you. Look at that. And I'm saying this because you are also a biome, you are a structure. The Atlantic forest biome is a trillion DNA molecules. You are a trillion replications of the same DNA, but it's also a biome. And a new concept changes you. Another very important thing, and it's good to always remember, is that when we are looking at a landscape, and let's look at a biome now, the Atlantic forest or the Amazon biome, you are there. You are looking at that landscape every 300 milliseconds. You recreate that landscape because when you look at a landscape, it's as if the landscape is looking at you. And when you look at the landscape, you locate yourself within it. You reconstruct yourself by looking. To look, to see is not a passive act. To see is to be. To see is to be. How we are being destroyed by social media because we are seeing and being, because seeing is being, it is being. You rebuild yourself. Let's go. Freedom of life, COP30. What we could improve a lot. The fantastic biome, which I already talked about a little. And let's talk now about something I always talk about, Citizen Drex. Citizen Drex and Immigrant Drex. I think I've talked about this a few times with you. 2 very strong things, Citizen Drex. Oh, and carbon credits, COP30, Citizen Drex, Immigrant Drex, carbon credits, these 3. What happens today, there's something that sometimes, wow, there are some friends. Sometimes when I talk to them, they get a little lost and say, this government is corrupt, or that's this and that, or we're in a dictatorship. Listen, be careful about something very important I'm going to say. Today we have a large mafia force in Brazil, but the population isn't told what the mafia is. So the mafia remains something very vague. What is the mafia? The mafia is an organized crime structure that involves politicians, judges, governors, mayors, councilors, deputies, senators, the president, vice president, ministers. The mafia, that's what the mafia is. You don't need to involve all of them, just some of them. For example, the militias in Rio de Janeiro. Militias in Rio de Janeiro are mafia because they involve city councilors, they involve a lot of things. So it's mafia. So the attacks that are happening today in Rio de Janeiro, going into the favelas and destroying and killing a lot of people, are usually not in militia territory because militia territory is mafia territory. So even the governor doesn't interfere in militia territory because they are mafia. He'll interfere in territory that isn't militia territory, in the territory of their competitors. So when you're in favor of this killing of a bunch of poor black people and you say it's armed, and I don't know where those fuses came from, how that stuff appeared there because they turn off the cameras before killing people. They turn off the cameras. It's impressive and it gets a lot of votes. So this mafia likes to work on disguising your rise so that you always go against something that harms the mafia itself. The mafia is a way of working with the population itself, of making the population go against the state. Anyone who tells you that the state is there to bite the citizen because the state is corrupt, because the state has to end, that's part of a message from the mafia. That's what the mafia is. The mafia will always attack the state, but the mafia also does something very interesting. When something happens on one side, attention is focused on that side. The mafia goes and promotes something within the organization, in Congress, in laws and regulations, changes laws and regulations when the population's attention is focused on something. For example, remember the talk about COVID? During the COVID era, look, everyone's talking about COVID. It's time to push through controversial measures. It's time to change laws, rules, and regulations, and to implement mafia-related things. That's what the mafia is. And now, for example, we have COP30. Everyone's talking about COP30. And what happens suddenly in Congress? Speaking of Congress, they're not going to try to stop the federal police from going after mafiosos, going after corrupt politicians, real mafiosos. But Brazil doesn't talk about the mafia, so it's organized crime. Yes, but organized crime, what kind of crime is that that involves congressmen, involves senators, involves, what kind of crime is that? It's the mafia. So the mafia does this. And you can see that this week in Congress, there's this game of taking away the powers of the federal police because the federal police is reaching Faria Lima, reaching senators and deputies. So it's possible. It's not possible. So what happens? While COP30 is taking place, Congress is now releasing some amendments, something so that the federal police can't arrest deputies or senators. Do you understand what we're talking about? And not even party presidents. So we're going to talk about the mafia. And we don't talk about the mafia. The mafia involves agribusiness. This doesn't mean that agribusiness is mafia-like, but it involves people from agribusiness. Does agribusiness have anything to do with COP30? Yes. Agribusiness, for example, involves someone deforesting land, that person selling the land to another, and to another, and to another, and suddenly three, four, then one buys it, and now, until it reaches them, the process takes a long time. Remember in Rio de Janeiro, those deals where people who had some property near the regarding the area belonging to the Navy, some militiamen would come there, kill the person, bury them on the same land, and let it pass. Remember that some deputies even said, no, we have to change these Navy lands because this will facilitate the mafia's business. That's what the mafia is all about. It's about transferring things in land. And COP30 has this problem. And now I'm talking about the problem because COP30 is starting to talk about carbon credits. Well, we're in this together. As Carlos says, we're in this together. Carbon credits, we're in this together. Carbon credits are very good. However, carbon credits are good for individuals, for private individuals. If carbon credits are for legal entities, they will fall into the financial market and become speculative credit. Carbon credits should only be for individuals. For example, hectares. The proposal that I think Lula mentioned or someone mentioned is $4 per hectare, but then a person could have up to 1,000 hectares of credit. $4,000 at most. And then even more than that, it has to be passed on to someone else. One person owns 1,000,000 hectares. That's not enough space. We need freedom. We need freedom of movement and not the number one, 0 1, owning all the land in Brazil. That can't be. So carbon credits have to come and be a credit for individuals. And the Citizens DREC, Department of Repression of Organized Crime, is important because it also addresses this issue. That young man, that person who is going to burn that area, hold on, he's earning the country's income. He's not going to commit a crime because he has something to lose. Those who have nothing to lose will do anything. Okay. Then there's also the immigrant tax that I'm talking about. If someone comes from another country, from Venezuela, Argentina, the United States, Italy, China, Bolivia, it doesn't matter where they come from, when they come, the country itself is giving entry to this person who is an immigrant, and this person who is an immigrant is coming from China. Okay, from China. Look, Chinese immigrant, you're going to earn $10 a day. Yes, this money will come from trade relations with China or from a guarantee fund for these trade relations. So you will be an asset to Brazil. You will come in and Brazil will generate money with you. The economy will generate with you. We want immigrants in this way because it will boost our local economy, but our citizens are also earning income from the country. So the economy will naturally adjust. And no, after a certain level. Look, if you earn this much now, you're entitled to Bolsa Familia, a Brazilian social welfare program. But look, 5 reais less, and you're no longer entitled to Bolsa Familia. Then you enter a legal justice-related dispute. Why can that person have it and I can't, and she can have it and I can't? Everyone. Owner of the country, direct citizen. Did you understand the mafia? To help you understand the mafia a little better, let me tell you something. In your city, there are probably 12 very rich people. The mafia is right there among them, one or two of them. In your state, 40 or 80 people are the richest, and the mafia is within them. And in all of Brazil, there are 120 very wealthy people, and the mafia is within them, 2 or 3, and that's enough. Because it's enough. These are people with hundreds of billions of reais. They have television networks, networks of I don't know, from church. Now, church, you have an offering, you receive 100 reais, you say you receive 10,000 reais, you've already laundered 9,900 reais in a day. Church is like a gas station church. To launder money is a blessing. It's very easy, and it's the path the mafia takes. The mafia likes to launder money to leave that money in the middle of the process. So let's go. When you enter and get a general idea of what the biome is, you see, somehow we manage to, and we are part of the biome. We are in the biome, being the biome. We are not an extraterrestrial being that landed on Earth. We were generated. Every atom of my body is from planet Earth. We are from Earth. We are not on Earth. We are from Earth. That is decolonial. And being from Earth, you are together with your biome, and you will be much better off where you are on planet Earth, the biome with the natural vegetation. The natural flora and fauna will do you good if you start to synchronize with this biome. When you begin to see the biome being, when you begin to see and build yourself within the biome, that vision you have of the trees, the rivers, and you start to perceive yourself as an element within what you are seeing, then you become part of a whole, which is the biome. There is no longer a division between what you see and what you are. This usually occurs in zone 2. Zone 2 is because you are not focused on producing, nor has anyone forced you to produce. You may be producing, but you are free. You are in synchronicity with yourself. This can happen in deep meditation. That's fine. It can be during a long walk, in contemplation, in observation, in being free to feel and to create things. Zone 2, and in Zone 2, you can feel yourself to be the biome. Today, we're talking about global warming, all that stuff. Some people believe it, some people don't. Some people simply dismiss it because they're following someone else's idea. That's a problem if you're doing that. If you follow someone, you've ceased to be. You have to have your own ideas about pollution, about waste, about how to improve the planet. your ideas, what's best for the planet, more waste, less waste, this or that, and what can you do to improve the planet without being a follower. So, what happens when you use that idea? You become a protagonist and you create new situations. Your DNA is meant to make a difference on the planet. He didn't come to be a follower. Oh, okay. But in the colonial system, you have to follow a leader. You're like a cult. Your leader, no matter what he says, I have to follow him blindly. That's a cult. Understand? And you don't need a leader. Your pastor isn't your leader. Your president, your minister, your master, he's not your leader. You are your own leader. It's like the words, those who truly appreciate, and I greatly admire what Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. If you are not your own way, if you are not your own truth, if you are not your own life, you have lost your way, your truth, your life, because you have ceased to be yourself in order to follow someone else. Whoever ceases to be themselves and follows someone else has given up on being themselves. So you're going to be a follower, obviously, even so you're from this religious line or that religious line or that other religious line, no problem at all. But you have your DNA creating, thinking, helping the planet. How have you helped the planet? Man, where is the biome where you are? If I am, I don't know, somewhere on the planet, what is the native tree of that place? What is the native crop? What are the native animals of that place? Is it possible for a human to coexist with that? How? We don't know, but we try. Is it possible for us to face prosperity in a verbi? Berber prosperity is a community. There's a Berber community in Costa Rica that says prosperity is about living in harmony with the environment and not generating waste. Is it possible for us to generate waste? Of course it is. How can we do that? There's a possibility that COP30 will be a major turning point, and these so-called civilized countries that polluted like crazy, that polluted a lot, that dumped a lot of plastic, a lot of pollution, are now talking about how things should be done, but don't want to do anything. These big polluters, in some way, have to protect the countries that have forests, but they don't want to. They don't want to. Because if you want to continue thereafter that capitalist aspect, which is profit, consumption, and accumulation, and more, which is very interesting, there's profit, consumption, and accumulation. And do you see my hand here? You see it. This Planet Zero One talks about profit, consumption, and accumulation in some kind of invisible hand of the market, which doesn't exist. It's simply to leverage money for the capitalist system itself. So what do we have to do? Think, be, see, contemplate, change the world around you for the better. Otherwise, you'll remain that person who has to do something. It's not someone, it's you. And it's not a big thing, it's a small thing around you. Sometimes you do selective waste collection at home. Sometimes you do something, do something. The important thing is that you are proactive. Folks, that's what I wanted to leave you with this week. Big hug. And to those following COP30, great job. Keep going strong. It's the way. We have to turn the planet around. Let's stop consuming so much. What's the point of profit, consumption, and accumulation? Let's start being, living, and learning with ourselves, observing our own biome. And this biome, which is ours, connecting, synchronizing with the Atlantic forest, Amazon, or Andean biome, or anywhere on the planet, because this synchronicity is the beauty of being, of living. Life will end. Life doesn't just pass, it ends. Take care of yourself and those around you. A big hug. Until next Wednesday.